only going to talk today about getting mail off my node. There are lots and lots and lots of configuration options within SMTP that we are not covering today. So we are only going to cover the configuration options that help you get your node, or excuse me, get your mail off of your node. Okay. So we're going to review, we kind of wrote up a little flow chart. It's a very simplistic look at it. And then we're going to take a look at the log file, because really that log file is your friend. It's your friend. Okay, here we go. Click on that one. All right. So we have a configuration file. And these are the ones we're going to cover today. So here's our configuration file location. Inside that configuration file, you have these options. So previous to 5.7, everything was controlled via logicals. Okay, so if you're on 5.5, 5.6, 5.4, UCX, then you're going to have like TCP/IP $ SMTP underscore log underscore level. Oh, I completely kind of lied. And then you have the set config SMTP / zone equals set config SMTP / subs equals domain equals whatever. Okay, so you have either logicals or you have that set config SMTP or show config SMTP. Today we're concentrating on the 5.7 and higher because we're going to talk about the config file. So in our config file, there's a parameter you can set, the log level. Talk about that. We'll talk about what the zone is. We'll talk about a substitute domain, a no substitute domain for our own node, alternate gateway, and then if you always want to send it there. So those are the things that we're going to need to troubleshoot outgoing SMTP mail or to configure it. Okay, pretty. It looks simple right now, right? Simple mail transport protocol. Okay. So when there's issues, the best thing to do is just to go ahead and set that log level. I don't even play around. I go straight to 5. Okay. Don't even, you bring me a 2 or a 3. And it's odd that because we don't have a 1 or a 4. We have 2, 3, and 5. Okay. You can still use the logical in version 5.7. You don't have to modify the config file. For myself, I stick with the logical. For my other TCP/IP partner, he always uses the log level :5 in the file. Okay, he's retired. We don't care about him anymore. We're going to stick with our logical. You will have to restart mail. Now, there's 2 ways of restarting mail. You can do the old method of TCP/IP stop mail, start mail. I try not to teach people that because I feel like it's a bad habit. You get better results with the shutdown and startup procedures in Systaller Manager. We should be seeing that later. So here's how simple our little flow chart is. So the first thing that happens, we're going to send some mail. Do we have a substitute domain? We'll talk about what that means in a couple of moments. So if that's foreign words to you, no panicking. Okay, do we have a substitute domain? If we do, is that going to be considered local to us? Do we have a no substitute domain inbound parameter set? Yes or no? We'll deliver it local or we'll send it off the node. If we don't have a substitute domain, we'll see, is this mail local mail? And local mail doesn't necessarily mean it's for my node. Okay, so we'll talk about the definition of local mail. Oh, right there when we drop down. Is it on my node or not? We'll send remote, we'll send it locally. Do we have an alternate gateway? If we're sending remotely, do we have an alternate gateway? Boom, send it over there. And then if not, we'll just send our mail directly. So let's talk about local mail a little bit. We're going to talk about this little section here. Is it local mail? If it's yes, is it on the node? If it's not on the node, send it remote. Okay. So we have to take a little side trip. Can't just talk about what is the definition of local mail. I'll spoil it. So we have this idea of aliases. There's a default list of aliases. It is your host name plus the domain, your local host plus the domain. So in our case, we're using the node 1 as our example. So that is going to be its list of what it considers local. Okay? So that we have a predefined list, and then you can define your own list. You can say, and by the way, I'm going to let node1.vmssoftware.com also be considered local. I would put this in this file, tcp/ip $smtp_aliases.txt in the SMTP directory. And now that would be on that list of local mails. Okay. So that is the idea of aliases helping us decide what's local mail. So local mail, we're starting to get the picture, is all about the domain. Do I consider, I'm pretending I'm a node, but does node 1 consider that domain to be local to node 1? That's how we're going to define local mail on node. So if we look at the log file, here's our default alias list. This is how it's going to appear in the log file. Oopsies, that jumped ahead on me. So when we type our SMTP aliases text file, I put in their cluster and cluster.lab or cluster.lab. And then from the log file, we see now, not only did it have my 4 in there, it added the 2 from the log file or from the configuration file. So the important thing about that is when you're configuring things, you're always wondering, is there a default list? Or if I modify the default list, if I add an aliases.txt, does the default list get overwritten? In this case, it does get appended. Okay, there are other things in TCP/IP where if you put a configuration in, it overwrites the default. So you have to add the default back in. So in this case, it's going to add and append. So let's talk about the zone. This is kind of where we really know what our local mail is. Our zone, by default, is going to be, when we looked at lab, well, let's look at the bottom. Our configured domain is myzone.vmssoftware.com. So our zone is going to be -1 of our configured domain. Okay, so I can deliver local to me. I can deliver it by hand. If it were a letter, I could hand it to you in the room. Is vmssoftware.com. Okay, so if we use that analogy, you guys are vmssoftware.com. Those guys out there are not local. Okay, so by default, the parameter is going to be commented out, and you're going to get the default behavior. So if you can also get to, like we have sister companies. Let's say I can also get to my sister company. And so I'll say my zone parameter could be vmssoftware.com, 21stcentury.com. Remember how I said sometimes it appends, sometimes it replaces? This is going to replace your default. So if you said 21stcentury.com, you wouldn't get VMS software. Okay, so this one is not an add. This parameter is a replace. And let me know if I'm talking too fast, because these concepts are simple individually. When you put them all in the same bucket, it's a mess. Okay, so let's look at in the log file, and we will see a full log file later. So I just wanted to chunk it out first. In the log file, when we're sending to what we consider a local mail, we read the domain as cluster.lab.vmssoftware.com, and then it does its little status check. We're on our first pass there. It says it's going to send the local mail. Okay, so what does this tell us? Right away, we know that we think we can send this ourselves. Okay, and it's local to us. Boom, we're going to send local mail. Oh, when we look at it here in the log file, this is telling us this local mail is not just that we can send it ourselves. It's telling us that it is on our node. Okay, so imagine that you're looking at this and you see cluster.lab, and then you see it's local mail, and you're like, huh, this node is not configured to receive mail for cluster.lab. You already know you have a problem. Okay, so that's why that's important. There's going to be a lot of things that we kind of look at in the log file that don't seem interesting at all. For me, as I'm looking through a log file, you called me for an SMTP problem. I'm looking at this, I'm saying, okay, read domain is that, we consider that local. Already, I'm like, is that right? Is that wrong? I'm making a note, putting that information on the shelf. Okay, I'm going to continue through the log file and see if that becomes more interesting. If we were sending remote mail, so now I'm on node 1 or whatever I was on, I'm going to send it to ia10.eng.vmssoftware.com. Remember, our zone was vmssoftware.com. Okay, I can send that myself, but it's remote mail because it is not on this node. Okay, so now we already know how that is playing out. I'm going to be reaching out somewhere else. And that is in essence, that was like local mail. That was that first little section that we covered in our flow chart. So let's look at another section. You're back to the flow chart. We covered the center section there first. Let's go to the left side. Let's talk about that substitute domain. Okay. Like if I get in my Wayback Machine, earlier in many customers would be trying to send mail. I don't know how old you guys are, but remember when we had that like backsim and it would send mail back. Okay, we're in our alpha days, and it would send mail back to the homeland and let us know we had a disk drive problem. There worked a lot of calls where you were trying to have some kind of automated monitoring tool, send a mail back to a vendor. Okay, now the node is going to be node1.lab.vmssoftware.com, whatever. But when that gets out on the internet and it gets to, I was at HP at the time, it gets to HP, might have been digital. When it gets to digital, digital's like, I don't know anything about lab.vmssoftware.com. Reject this crap. But if I change my substitute domain to say that this mail came from vmssoftware.com, then it's like, oh, I know VMS software. I like them. I'm going to let it through. So if you want you to change the appearance of your domain on your from, then you can do that with this parameter, and this will affect every mail going out. Now, the side effect of that can be unfortunate sometimes. So in my world, I'm not sending my mail from my nodes to any vendor, okay? Well, not just any vendor. I'm sending it to myself as a vendor. So now vmssoftware.com has become local. Remember in our list of aliases? That's going to be on there. Oh, I think if I send it debbie.west@vmssoftware.com, I'm not getting my mail because there's no debbie.west on my VMS machine. That's not good. So now we have another parameter. No subdomain inbound. We're going to set that to true. That's going to say if you're going to VMS software, don't put that to the local machine. Not local. So we'll put both of those in there. We'll restart our mail. We'll give it another go. You know, I'm just going to throw this out there that mail providers or mail like Gmail has recently locked down their stuff. We'll see that later in a log file where you can't play these games anymore. It's still going to know that my node1.eng.vmssoftware.com, it doesn't know me. It's still going to know that. It's going to know that it doesn't know the IP of my NATed firewall port. So it's still, you know, this doesn't solve all the problems, but it sure can solve some problems. Okay. So let's talk about how SMTP routes mail. Now we've already talked about if we deliver it to ourselves, we know that we hit VMS mail, deliver the darn thing. Okay, if it's going to leave my node, now, whenever we have that little box that says send remote mail, this is an explanation for that box. How do we route mail? We're going to use either an MX record or an A record. And we could use records from the bind server or the DNS. So we could, then we have an order of how we're going to look them up. So let's stop for a moment and talk about an MX record. What is that? It's a mail exchange record served out by your bind server. Okay. You can also have it in your local routing table. Okay. But it's specifically for mail. And then an A record is just a name to address record. So if you did a TCP/IP show host, my host, you'd get it. And we have some commands here on how you could show these options. And I think we're going to have a slide on that. Okay. So our preference is local MX records. The important thing is if you're going to set up a local MX record, remember two things. You own that. If there's a change out there somewhere, you better update your record or you're going to be, wondering why you sent it to the wrong place or tried to send it to the wrong place. It will eventually not work. So those, if you enter them locally, because sometimes you have to, if you put them in locally, remember that, see how I put google.com in lowercase and in quotes? DMS is not case sensitive until it is. And now it is. So we'll want to make sure that we put that in lowercase. Okay. Because if you put it in uppercase, SMTP won't find it. It just won't. And you'll be like, didn't I do that? Was that a different node? That's what happens to me. Was it a different node? Okay. So an example of the first one, I made up the gateway to protect Google. So they're going, I made that up for my local database so that I would know in my log file if I hit the local record or if I hit a remote record. Okay, so I put google.com, notice again, the lowercase. I gave it a preference of 5, and then I made up a gateway. Okay, if I went to the internet, which is going to be next, if I went to my bind server, they're going to give me a list of records, and the lower the number, that's the preference as we start from low to high. And I just put 1. You could have many. So that's that example. And that's what it would look like. And then we are doing the host records next. Notice that it goes host records on bind databases next. And notice in our example commands, we have /local or /no local. That really will, we will have no doubt where that record came from. So we're saying /no local, go to my bind server. There's my bind server telling me the hosts for Google are those addresses. If we take a note of those 172.53, well, it ends in 113 and 100. We go back here, doesn't even, that IP is not even nearly the same. So an MX record and an A record serve completely 2 different purposes. So if you hit the A record, especially with Google, you're probably not hitting a mail server. And then we'll do our local host table. Okay, and so then I put that as all 11s, just so that when I go back in my testing, I'll know if I hit that record. So we have covered that. Let's talk about the alternate gateway. Okay. So inside the configuration file, we have alternate gateway, and you could put a name or an address. Now, the thing is, if you put an address, again, you're in this whole maintenance mode. You have to maintain that. If you say that my alternate gateway is, mta.vmssoftware.com, I'm going to go to my bind server every time I send mail and look that up. If you put in IP address, 10.10.10.10, I'm never looking that up. It's only ever going there. And if that is wrong, you're going to have a problem. Okay. There can be situations where let's go back to our zone for a moment. For the altgate always parameter, I set my zone to be, my zone by default is vmssoftware.com, let's say. I know that I can only get to lab.vmssoftware.com, or I know that I can't even get to other things in my own domain. Let's say that's the truth. In that case, I'm going to say send it to my alternate gateway always. So if it's not local to me, just send it to them and let them deal with it. Not my problem. Okay, so those parameters kind of go hand in hand. It is quite often, if you have an alternate gateway, quite often, I would say at least 50 to 70%, you're going to have alternate gateway always. So we have The slides explain if you don't, if you have to go back and review. So from the log file, if we had an alternate gateway and we're sending mail to one of my Gmail accounts, so my alternate gateway is mta.vmssoftware.com. My zone is eng.vmssoftware.com. So then let's look at the next one. Comparing my remote mail, gmail.com, with my zone, they are not the same. I'm going to need a gateway. So now we've learned something else from our log file somewhere later. You know, we learned earlier we're probably sending remote mail. We found we had an alternate gateway. We found we need the alternate gateway. We're going to make just a brief stop at general gateway because I've taken many calls where someone has defined the general gateway, but the general gateway is for UUCP mail. And I don't know how old you are. I do not know what this is, except for that it's a predecessor to SMTP mail. So in my career, we have never used the general gateway ever. But people want to use it. Don't fall for that. Just don't fall for it. So let's talk really quick before we start going further into the log file. Let's talk about the status codes of SMTP. SMTP, I mean, it really is a beautiful thing. It's very communicative with the person who's trying to figure out what's going wrong. So during SMTP, there's a conversation. So I'll make my three-way connection to the MTA. And once that's done, the MTA, it's his job to say, hi, I'm an SMTP server. Then I say, hi, my name is node1. Blah, blah, blah. And then it says, blah, blah, blah. So when I say, hi, my node name is blah, blah, blah. It's actually Hilo. My name is blah, blah, blah. Hilo and the host name. Then the reply from the SMTP server will be one of those four kind of codes. Starts with a 2, starts with a 3, starts with a 4, starts with a 5. Okay. I only covered the first number because it's kind of where I focus. If you want to know what the middle number needs, you can pop out there to that URL. But let's start with the number 2. We like it too, because 2 says you are good to go, babe. Let's go on. It's usually 250. 250, okay. 250, pleased to meet you. 250, all kinds of fun things, whatever. Like sometimes you know that the network people have a sense of humor because they will say whatever they want there. That is, you can program that. And sometimes it's like 250, okay. A 300, a 400. You know, if we see a 3 or a 4, I'm going to look at the message and see what it says because I'm looking for a 2. 2 makes me happy. A 5, what also makes me happy, but in a sad way, because 5 means that we have a problem here. Houston, we have a problem. So now we look at the message associated with the 5 because it's going to tell us what is the problem. We also kind of know if we said Hilo node1.lab.vmssoftware.com and it said 500 something, we know it does not like lab, or it does not like my host name. There's something about my particular host name. This is personal. Okay, so now I know maybe I want a substitute domain. You know, so depending on what command that problem comes in on, we kind of know where we should look. Okay, so let's take a look at the log file of when everything is flowing beautifully. Now, no one calls me and says, hey, Debbie, I got a great log file for you to look at. They don't call me for that. Okay, so I sent mail from my Debbie. Oh, the mail, I had a substitute domain. No, I'm sending to myself. Hello, I can read. Okay, so I'm sending mail to myself at VMS Software. And I'm just testing the substitute domain. So from the log file, we will see that my substitute domain is vmssoftware.com. I'm sending up. Oh, I'm sorry, this is not the full log file. Got ahead of myself. Okay, this is substitute domain defined, and it turns out to be local. We're going to see not good things. So in my log file, I see I sent, in reality, I'm sending from myself, kind of to myself. My substitute domain is VMS Software. It comes up. I'm sending local mail to VMS Software. We talked earlier that Debbie.West is not a valid user. on my VMS machine. And this is the kind of error we're going to see in the log file. No such user. So we're trying to send, we know we should get this. This is VMS software. We're not blocked. But then we see no such user. We're like, VMS mail doesn't know me. So that's what that would look like. Okay, when I set the no substitute domain inbound, notice how we don't get an error because it worked, right? We go straight to send remote mail to VMS software and the rest just flows fine, no 500s. So we're good there, but that's what that would look like in the log file. Okay, if we take our, we got a remote rejection with our default configuration straight out of the box. So those parameters I put up there, we changed the log level, obviously to 5, but other than that, we have no configuration. I'm going to send to myself at tcpwinch@gmail. Okay, well, Gmail is very upset about this. So we get down to, we're sending our remote mail, and we get down further, and we get a receive buffer 550. Red alert, battle stations. So it's saying that the IP address that connected to me doesn't have this PTR record. What? PTR record, what is that? A PTR record is the address to name translation. So in bind, if you look in your local host table, it's all for one, right? But when you go to bind, forward lookup, reverse lookup. So they don't have to be the same names. In our case, it's saying 148.51. Well, I can tell you right now, my address is 10 dot something because I'm in our lab. So this 148.51 229.45 is not known to Gmail, and it is upset about this. It thinks that I am a scammer trying to do naughty things. So it's going to reject me. So if this were to come up, what would I do? If it were to come up on your system in the lab or in your business, I'd say go talk to your IT people and give them this information, because they need to make sure that this PTR record can be recognized on the outside world. If they want to get to Gmail, they may say to you, quit sending to Gmail, but it could be something, that there could be some business purpose to get to, in my case, Gmail. All right, so let's look at some general troubleshooting tips. If you can't connect, verify that you generally have TCP/IP connectivity. So we kind of looked at how we figure out which host we're going to connect to send our mail. So if we look at the MX records, we didn't have a local one, we're going to go to the bind ones. We're going to pick the first address on the list, for example, and we're going to say telnet, that address, 25. Do I get connected? If I don't get connected, I know I'm already done here. If I don't get connected to that, do I need an alternate gateway? I don't know. We're making a call to IT here, because either I'm supposed to get out and my firewall's not letting me, or I need an alternate gateway. Either way, I can't solve this without their help. We'll also verify the destination appears correct, because that kind of goes back to the local MX. Does that sound right? And when you have your debug log file, if you go back into your debug log file, if it looks like it's telling you it's going to some place that you don't think is right, again, how did that happen? How did we pick that? Let's go back to our MX records, or what? Do we have some kind of weird configurations? A lot of times too, customers will call in, and as a side note, the biggest problem in TCP/IP I ever handle is bind resolver issues. A lot of times people have antiquated bind resolver information as their bind resolver. So their bind resolver is now retired or old or deprecated. It may or may not still answer. People need to update that so that we can get our correct MX records. Or sometimes the IT department just neglected to update the MX records. I mean, these things happen, right? So check to see if that looks good. If that doesn't, if where you're trying to send it to doesn't really look good, like this is different, then go back and make sure your resolution is happening correctly, because maybe you have a problem upstream. Okay. Oh, hey, next slide. If we're not resolving the MX record correctly, we're going to go back to our bind resolver. We're going to contact RT. You know, it's always nice to look at your local PC if you're in the same kind of environment. I can look at my PC and see if I can get different information out of my PC than what I got from BMS. Then again, I'm going to see, does it use a different bind server? What's up with this? Because in theory, they should be giving me the same information. And you kind of need to know a little bit about your environment in order to really troubleshoot this, right? If you don't know about your environment, you're going to be calling IT to help you. Okay, so if your helo command fails, your remote server might not be able to look you up or reverse look you up. We talked about that. Throwing in an alternate gateway could help you out there. If it fails in the receipt to command, then usually if it fails in the receipt to command, if we, I really think my log file is not in my, anyway, if we fail in our receipt to command, then that means that we are sending to this node, we think maybe it's on our alternate gateway, but perhaps no one let that machine know it's our alternate gateway. So I send from bmssoftware.com and I send over to our relay guy, and it says, not authorized to relay for you. It's going to say something like that. Can't relay for you, can't forward your mail. It's going to say something like that. And you'll be like, oh, maybe that's not my alternate gateway. Maybe if you're a relay server, there's a list of IPs or domains that you will relay for or to. Maybe you don't fit into that role. Again, who are we calling? Our IT people. Okay, so if it fails after the data command, so when we look at the data command, sorry, there's supposed to be a log file in here. So when we fail after the data command, that means that, okay, so it's never going to fail on the data command because the data is just data. That's not going to be judged by the server, okay? But after you get done sending your data, then the remote side you send a period in the carriage return line feed, and then the remote side will be like, oh, sometimes they analyze your mail on each line. Sometimes they don't analyze your mail until you say you're done sending the data. The whole thing has been it's not really sent, but you sent it to them for analysis or for delivery. They'll get to the period carriage return line feed and they'll be like, I didn't like something. Like if we went back to that Google one, that error came after my data. So Google is in the habit, and this changes over the years, whether they'll parse it individually or whether they parse the mail at once. So Google's machine is now parsing after you have completely sent your stuff over there, and then it's like, no, I think I didn't like you. So and you may have also have seen that error earlier in the helo command is where that actually failed. So it really depends on how your mail gets parsed along the way. Okay. So, Miss Daria, do we think that... Okay, my log files didn't get onto this PC, but I have my PC.
I think I can help, but you keep talking now.
Okay, so as we look for a log file of a working log file example, does anybody have any questions about that? I mean, it's simple and yet it's still a lot. And once you get each one of those little boxes known to you, you're like, oh, I can see why Debbie likes that. It's simple. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about that? Yes.
One of the things I use quite frequently, I know it's helped others, so I use the logical TC SMTP underscore from logical when I'm actually sending the mail, so that we typically use the same account to run certain privileged jobs, system or whatever, but when the inbound mail comes in, we like to be able to categorize what we change from address so that it's either backups or it's tape changes or whatever. So that's one technique that we use so that same sending account can differentiate the emails that we send. So that's just one trick that we use.
Yeah, okay, so remember how we did a substitute domain? That's kind of related to that. The logical he's talking about is the TCP/IP $SMTP underscore from logical. And that could be like you have one user, or it's more of an individual one. So each user can configure their own outbound domain name. Okay, they can actually change the username too, can't they?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So they could say, they can change that whole from field. Okay, individually. And then inside of your log file, you can change it inside your log file, inside your configuration file, you can disallow that. Okay, so, we kind of need to protect ourselves from our users.
Presentation.
You should be in my documents. Should be in my local documents. Okay, remember how, if any of you came and saw me yesterday, I have this list of things that I don't want to know before I retire. And Windows is on that list. The more complicated that thing gets, the more I'm not interested. Okay, let's think about where would I have put this? It should have been in our documents.
Debbie, no?
It's going to be on my local machine. If we just search here, SMTP. No, those are the things. If we go to, sorry about this. I should have put it on my dongle. I said, oh no, don't put it on your dongle. You'll be fine. Yeah, we need to go to Windows, users, me, documents, probably. No. Okay.
I can look for it. It's an SMTP.
It's SMTP. Like, oh, it's gonna be in my mail. I can get it out of there too. In my from. So when we get the opportunity to look at our log file, again, it's going to very nicely, very politely follow the flow chart that we were starting to look at. So I feel a little geeky about how much I love SMTP. Yes, sir, Michael.
What things can you not find in the log file? If you're having an issue with SMTP, you're leaving the log file, it's just not there.
The only things you're not going to find in this log file don't pertain to this topic today. So if SMTP doesn't start, that's not going to be in the log file. Well, that'll be in possibly the run log, maybe. Startup problems are not going to be in there. This is like SMTP is up and running, and I can't send my mail out. We didn't really talk about how to deal with the queuing because SMTP has queues. So by default, you get one queue. We didn't really talk about how, let's just take a moment and talk about this. You've got a multi-node cluster, you're 5.7, I want to say ECO2 or higher. Now we're cluster aware. That's great. And it's stinky all at the same time because the default queue name is like TCP/IP $SMTP. Okay, everybody's default generic queue is TCP/IP $SMTP. And then you have the queues, the execution queues, and all of those execution queues from all the nodes are going to point to that. So if you have an intermittent email problem, then you're going to have to look to see what's your order. shut off the first queue. Make sure, or in my case, I shut them all down but one. Does this mail work? Okay, that node's good. Shut that one off. Go to the next one. Does that mail not work? Let's find the one not working. Let's fix that. And then test the queues as you go. Make sure the configurations are good, or look at the configurations and restart all the mails once you have the configurations set. So that's a little tricky there with we're cluster aware. And so how you would solve that problem to not be cluster aware, which is what I kind of prefer, is don't have TCP/IP $SMTP as your queue name. Okay, another thing is too, if you're in a cluster and you just want 2 nodes to send mail for everybody, you can say TCP/IP $SMTP is your queue name, and just don't start the queue on this node. So it'll always go to those 2. And you can put as many queues on each node as you would like.
I found this one.
That's the PowerPoint.
The PowerPoint. Oh, did you want not a PowerPoint?
Yeah, it's just a file.
What, I mean, just a file TXT?
It's no, it's a docx probably.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
Word doc.
Then I didn't know what I was looking for.
Sorry. Okay, so it'll be in my mail. I can just look what I sent to Kiara.
Okay.
It's here somewhere, doggone it. Let's go to our sent folder.
Okay, I can share this.
Doesn't have SMTP in the name of it. Oh, yeah, it does. Okay, so we're going to look here because Daria, she might be having a talk with me later about how it might be worth my time to learn some more Microsoft stuff. But really, don't like that mouse in my hand. And it doesn't even make me feel old or guilty. You cut right here, it's the word letters VMS come out.
How about this?
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, all good.
Thank you for your support.
Yeah. Nice.
I feel loved when people help me. Maybe that's what my problem is. Okay, so here's the top of the log file. Right away in the log file, it's going to give you your configuration. So we don't have to stop and look at our .conf file. We don't. Just give me the level 5 and we'll just start there. I highlighted, or excuse me, I bolded the things that we're going to look at. We're going to stop at the alternate gateway. We talked about that. We're going to look at the substitute domain and the zone. In our case, this is a completely generic file so far. Did we see notice the queue name we were just talking about that, TCP/IP $SMTP? If you want to move your log file, you could go ahead and do that. We had our number of queues just fly by. I put the log level to 5. You know, I did that with the logical. But you could do the J style and put it with in the config file. I don't like putting in the config file because then I have to edit the config file again. And that just makes me mad. Okay, so alt gate always is false. I don't have a substitute domain. I have just the standard local aliases. See how there's a lot of stuff that we don't even pay attention to. We're like, we don't care about any of this. Some things happened there. We kind of don't care about them. Okay, now we've unpacked the mail. We figured out who's sending, blah, 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 and we're reading our domain. We are going to send to vmssoftware.com. And I know that's remote mail from me, so I'm going to send it off my node. Here are my MX records. This is who I go to if I'm sending to VMS software. And it tells me I have a gate here with a preference of 0. When we talk about a preference of 0, well, preference of -1 means it's a host record. Okay, so preference of 0 is the lowest number. So we're doing stuff. We get that we're trying here. This is where if you had multiple MX records in some kind of a network situation, you'd see trying, and they would give you different addresses. You'd also notice that, like when I sent this mail, it was like, bam, gone. By the time I went to go look at the queue, it was out of there. Okay, if you can see your mail still in the queue, you're probably having a problem in this trying area, or you have a really big mail. Okay, so P1, when we see P1, we know I'm connected. And it gives you the address. Receive buffer, we got a 220, we like that. Starts with a 2. So it says right away, hey, this is my gigantic name. It's ready. And I say, hello, I'm sub 5. And it says 250. I'm good with that. And this 0D, 0A, carriage return line feed, it could be line feed, carriage return, I don't know. Then I'm going to send mail from. Okay. And I'm sending it from the system account because that's how I log in. And it says, okay, that sender's good. 250, I like that. All right, receive receipt 2. That's how we tell it where it's going. I'm sending it to myself, Debbie.west at VMS Software. And it says 250, we like that. Recipient's okay. I feel like it knows me, I'm okay. So then I'm going to put some data in here. This will include the header of the email and the body of the mail. Okay, we don't care about any of that. Oh, it tells us first 354 mail input end with a blah. Now we got a 3, but we know a 3 is a temporary and it's a success, so we're going to keep going. So we put in all of our header and our data, and then we send that period by itself with the carriage return line feed, and then it says 250. Woo! No errors here. 250, we are good to go. It's processed. It's going to take my mail and queued mail for delivery. And then we're done. Send buffer quit. We have no more to send. And then I did put the rest of the log file in. So see how the SMTP log file, it's intimidating because it's so big, but there's really, if you pay attention to the things that we talked about, it's doable, you know? Once you learn to ignore all of the noise, it's a nice, quiet little neighborhood to live in. So then it got done, mailing, it closed down, SMTP went back to sleep, and it's waiting for the next mail to process. It's hibernating. If it gets another tickle, it'll do that same thing all over again. In our log file, we will not see the config reprinted or whatever. We'll just see more of this same noise that we get to filter through. So if you're also, my recommendation for that is if you are, if you're working on an SMTP problem, bottom line, make sure if it's in a cluster, you're only working at one node at a time. You'll be a much happier person. Shut down most of those queues. If you have multiple queues, even on the same node, shut them down. If you have, oh my God, in the old days, people would call, I've got 5,000 mails in my queue and they can't send. Oh, thank God those days are over, because to try to get your mail sent instead of those mails that are kind of lingering was difficult. And you don't know if you really got anything done because it's going to take a long time to send thousands of mails. So try to isolate yourself there. So shut down your as many queues as you can. If you have extra queues, shut them down. Stay on one node. The log file gets ugly. Restart mail. If you do a test and you found the information in there, okay, we need to change another configuration parameter. Change that doggone parameter and start the mail again so that your log file doesn't have 2 in there, because it gets really big. You get the one where I tried to send, then you get the one where I couldn't send and I bounced it, and now we get our other one. So all of that is a lot of junk in the one mail file. So I just restart mail. It's just easier for me. Okay, so that's kind of the bottom line of SMTP and sending mail and how to read the log file. Because once you can read the log file, isolate where the problem is, you have a chance. Probably going to call IT. And the other thing is too, people are always like, I didn't get the mail, must be my VMS fault. Our job in VMS is to get the mail off of this node. What happens from there is not our problem. It's not our responsibility. It's our job to get it to the right place. We may need the help of IT. We may know what that is, so we can go. Okay, so you didn't have any questions last time. I think that's going to still be the case. Oh, we have a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, nowadays the security seems to be so pain in the ass, so to speak.
Yes.
And some companies are expecting that the email is clearly is showing that it's plain text. But
Oh, if it's encrypted or whatever? Yeah, here's going to be the problem. We don't do that. Okay, so if you need encrypted stuff, you're going to have to run IPsec or something. What we usually tell people is, like usually within the company, they won't be as crazy about encryption. You may have to send it over to a node that will, your mail forwarder may encrypt for you. Okay, that's our only solution now. Run some kind of encrypting like IPsec or something, or have somebody else do it for you. That's all we got right now. Now in version 7, when that comes out, there's going to be a lot of amazing fun things that are coming out. We'll see what they look like. I'm just like waiting at the door. Exactly, we'll see. But I'm like, I have big faith in the guy who's porting it. Okay, so we are done. So thank you for your time today. I hope it was well spent.